Welcome to Compound Insights, a podcast by CFA Society New York. I'm your host, Rob Rowan. Today we are joined by Sloan Ortel. Sloan founded Invest Vegan to create an investing thesis built around ethical investing, and to my knowledge, I believe she was one of the first ones in the world to do this, or at least an early pioneer in the subsector. Prior to that, she worked at CFA Institute and this place, CFA New York. She also did some time at Oppenheimer and did some consulting work to a single family office. So normally at this time I would say welcome, Sloan, but I'm saying welcome back.
Yeah, it is such a pleasure to be here. And yeah, I think like this will be a fun one. Some people in the CFA world know me for my sins.
Yeah.
Over the course of 9 or so years. And, and I really feel like I grew up here in a very real sense. I mean, part of that being like, the reality of just going through a gender transition in the public eye.
Yeah.
And that being like an awkward phase.
Yeah.
And getting to kind of encounter all the CFA society leaders and stuff like that. So when we walked in here, I like hugged the person at the front desk. I feel so glad to be here.
Yeah, they never change, right?
I was like, I was not expecting to be recognized, but I walk in and she's like, Sloan!
Yeah, they're pretty great down there. Well, so, one of the things that, our podcast does a few things. One of the things I think people would be exceptionally interested in hearing from you is how you got to where you are with Invest Vegan today, from concept through to the actual functioning of a registered investment advisor. So, can you just kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, and honestly, it's a really interesting one. Sometimes like you go, like as an adult, you can sit there and go and wonder how you got to where you are and like what the key ingredients were. And for me, a huge amount of it was just, like the luck basically to, I was like in 2010, I had some experiences in the financial sector. The world was in this incredible moment of introspection about the value that financial services can offer the planet. And I had, I'd been like building trading systems and whatever, and I loved finance. I loved the mechanisms. I loved the markets. But it was like fundamentally unclear to me at that time how to do it in a way that didn't conflict with my ethics, conflict with my morality, and also how to do it in a way that didn't, basically, take my clients' long-term investment capital and use it for R&D.
Right.
So like a huge part of, why I'm able to think and do and act the way that I am now was all the conversations that I got exposed to at CFA Institute, where I sort of was really lucky to just be here. In 2010, they had convened the Future Finance Council. There was, pretty much the whole organization from top to bottom was like, had a very clear rationale for doing the kind of deep thinking about what is finance for, that I think still needs to be done on an ongoing basis. Yeah. But it's one of those things that you can only really think about and reach consensus about in large groups in the aftermath of a crisis.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, like from that period, 2010 to, when did I leave? 2018? What is time?
18, yes.
Yeah. To 2018, basically that was the mainstreaming of sustainability in investment conversations, right? Like, so 2010, it was like only people who drive Subarus are thinking about this.
Right. And then ESG enters the conversation.
Yeah, ESG enters the conversation.
We're only doing the G.
Yeah. It took us like, I think by 2017, we were like, oh, this is we're not really implementing this the way the research says we should.
Right.
And I think among informed folks, there was concern about greenwashing. There was concern about, are we mis-selling the benefits of our strategies? But like I just had this profound opportunity to, I think I was telling you guys before we started, I've had like sitting in this room, I've had dozens of encounters where I'm listening to a panel, someone says a word that is like integrated reporting or, something that becomes a load-bearing concept in the way that I think about the delivery of shared value to long-term investors now. I feel like I just talked a lot about theory. Should we talk about how I actually did a firm?
Yes, that's actually where I was going to transition to, Sloan. So yeah, please do. Yeah, let's talk nuts and bolts now, and about how you articulate something that is kind of complicated, unless you're like people listening to this podcast have been in the business for 15 years and wondered what the heck they're doing, so, like, why they're here. Yeah, could you tell us about nuts and bolts from the idea to how you talk to clients about it, et cetera?
Yeah, so I mean, like you could basically think about Invest Vegan as a relatively straightforward investment thesis, philosophy, whatever. Basically, we seek to invest in companies that avoid preventable harm to living things, which is the definition of veganism, right? So, and that's like a subtle observation, but the term preventable creates like a window into a lens into thinking about governance that's really useful. So part A is avoid preventable harm to living things. We have a screening process around that. And then part B is deliver real world impact that's measurable, observable, and like not subtle, the same way that they generate revenue.
Okay.
Right. So, there's this kind of, I would say, phase in ESG where folks were really focused on like, almost like the baseball thing, the sabermetrics approach, where they were like, let's generate a whole bunch of data about like how many women are on the board and how many all of this sort of metadata that's not necessarily that material. Our focus is like, first, do you kill stuff in the way that you do business,
right?
Or do you harm things? And that
right.
that question. Humans are people too, or animals too, right? So that invites us to think about labor relations, to think about, tenure, about retention, about, stakeholder relationships. And, the reality of investing in sustainable companies is that they find new and exciting ways to disappoint you all the time. And like when I onboarded my colleague Gabe Ahmed, like one of our first meetings, I was like, look, we do sustainable investing in the real world. Like, and, as a trans woman, like I live in Utah, where the legislature is not a natural ally to me.
Right.
And I was just like, dude, you got to realize that like at least 15% of the management teams that hold our capital don't think I should be able to poop indoors.
Right.
There's
that's a moment. Yes.
Yeah. Right. Like, and so that like from outer, you sort of have to realize there's a natural limit to how aligned you can really be, and you just have to commit to the gray areas.
Well, yeah. I mean, so what you just talked about there is in terms of, the way that most people talk about this is scope 1, 2, and 3 now. You're on scope 9, right? So tell me a little bit about the due diligence process that you have in place, the oversight to know that, well, they're not harming anything today, but next Tuesday they start doing it.
Yep.
Because that's onerous, right? It's huge.
Yeah. I mean, so the process is really interesting. Like I was kind of cynical about process when I started, because everybody in the investment world is like, here's our process. And they have this PDF that like, doesn't really get used, but it has really nice flowcharts and it's designy. We put together a process in the first minute and have basically not changed it, except to like, it's a investment decision-making is a cumulative process everywhere, right? You take everything you've ever learned and apply it to whatever big questions you can identify are relevant.
Right.
So a big part of the process is actually in a CFA publication called the Investment Idea Generation Guide that I wrote with Jason Voss while I was at CFA Institute. And part of that is about scenario planning, taking like, uncertainties, basically identifying things that seem predetermined about the future, that seem, that might happen, and creating testable narratives that you can use to evaluate future-looking things, right? So that's a resource that is a tangible thing that people can go to right after this if they want to like think about it.
Okay.
But the way that we do it is basically we create a giant naughty list, right? So whenever we see a sustainable ETF, come to market, and a lot of these are cursed vehicles that are made by like marketing firms, right? So it'll be like, like the Coca-Cola Sustainable Future ETF or something like that. And it'll be something a marketing intern was like, oh yeah, here's some companies that seem good. And that might be, 100 like EV charging companies that have no hope of generating cash flow. We pull those into our investable universe spreadsheet. And basically on an ongoing basis, we're looking for reasons to kick people off of that.
Okay.
Right. And so we have this like big database of naughty list companies that anytime they pop back up, like, we load in an ETF, we type in all the tickers, and then it'll just kind of bar out red, and then we can filter them right out, and we don't have to look at them again.
Okay.
And so like one thing that I think I want to really underscore here is to a lot of traditional investment managers, this sounds like a lot of time.
Oh, it is a lot of time.
It is a huge time saver.
Oh, because you only they make the naughty list once, and you don't let anybody off the naughty list after.
I mean, we do let people off the naughty list.
Yeah.
They just don't want to get off the naughty list. Like, I mean, like like they just like, companies that are on the naughty list, like, I mean, they might be like a leather company, which like, I mean, like, I'm sure they're nice people and they love their moms, but like, they're not a fit for Invest Vegan.
Right.
Yeah,
there's a lot of those.
Yeah, like there's a decent, and like, but the thing is that from like a fundamental investment standpoint, not a great business, dude.
Right. Right. So you end up with the non-naughty list. What do you call it?
I like the lukewarm list, or I mean, I think the universe is the right way to think about it, right? Because like, basically that's a list of companies we haven't come up with the reason not to own.
Okay.
Right. And then, and then we have this kind of process where I use a modified system that was invented at a firm called Fred Alger called the Tick system.
Yeah, sure.
Where, basically whenever I get data or information on a company, like let's say a filing comes out, right? We'll have observations and I'll be like, hey, can you like check in? Can we check in? We might go to IR, or we might, go with someone in the community or something like that. But we also like summarize the findings in an integer, right? So like, let's say, CFA New York is like 100 in my book, which would be a super, like, we don't have anything, like our biggest position is like a 63, right?
Right.
I think highly of this place, but after this, I was like, I might go like, okay, this was a good podcast, we had a fun time, +2.
Okay.
Right. And so that carrying value flows straight into our portfolio construction.
Okay.
But it also helps us think about like the opportunity set holistically. Like after I've run through that list, I can sit there and go, like, if I know the ratings are fresh, I can sit there and go, okay, I've thought about the universe, I've thought about the world. Here are, on their own terms, a whole bunch of things that I think are interesting. So that's one part that's really a big deal. The other is we just don't trade that much.
Right.
Right. So we basically, when I started this out, I was doing it by myself. I was like, very easy to go nuts starting an investment business.
Yes.
Especially if you're doing active management, especially if you're like doing fundamental research. Like we have an active share of 98%.
Right. Okay.
So like there's sort of a long-term mental health thing to think about when you're doing that.
For sure.
Right. So I sort of arbitrarily was like, all right, what we're going to do is rebalance every new moon.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
Part of that's like, I'm too gay to function.
Right. Most people call that monthly reporting, but okay.
Well, I kind of like that the new moon cycle keeps us slightly off kilter with the rest of the industry.
Right, because there is the impact of the futures closing and all that stuff, the futures contracts and triple witching days and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And like, months are arbitrary. Lunar cycles have real effect. Mm-hmm. And I think like with our clients, we do our webinars on the full moon.
Okay.
Right. So, and like, people who are astro nerds will know, like, apparently, like I wasn't when I started doing this, but a lot of the people who are our clients know a lot about astrology.
Oh, really?
And we'll be like, oh yeah, great. That makes total sense that you rebalance there because you're supposed to set your intentions going into the full moon.
Oh, okay.
Right. Yeah.
I don't even know what moon we're in right now.
We are.
There's an app for that, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. It's the Apple. My Chinese and Indian friends will be like, oh yeah, the lunar calendar is the best. And our Arabic friends, sorry, not Indian friends, but
right. We're not ready for that. We still use daylight savings time.
Yeah, and imperial measurements.
Right. We're not ready for that. Well, okay, so this is exceptionally interesting. I guess so from a fundamental perspective, do you short the naughties or borrow and go super long the nice?
That is like such an interesting question at a couple of different levels, right? Because what we're trying to do is not extract value from this process, right? What we're trying to do is help kind people own stocks so that they cannot be poor when they die.
So
in the future.
You will borrow so you can buy more of their stocks so they have better funding.
We're trying to do organic risk control as much as we can, right? So basically the way that I think about our core product, which is this ethical growth strategy, is that like, yes, we probably could do fancy stuff with options or do fancy stuff with leverage and capital structures and whatever, and like squeeze more juice out of our IP.
Right.
Right. But really, what matters is not that to the client. Really, what matters to the client is the knowledge, the understanding that in response to an unspecified future problem,
Of which there's always one.
of which there's always one, and it's always interesting, that will be handled in a way that they think makes sense and is acceptable and aligns with their values, right? Like so like, and that's kind of a place where the things that are sexy to investment dorks and the things that are important to clients,
You get a little split. Yeah, for sure, for sure. And you can tell which side of that I'm on. Okay, so I guess this might be a good place to pivot to the other thing you're doing.
Oh yeah. I girl boss a little bit too hard sometimes. And yeah, I mean, so I have this incredible privilege to work with, my uncle, one of my best friends, and actually like, I kind of hate this from a diversity standpoint, but a bunch of my former teammates from college ski teams.
Oh yeah.
And so we my uncle Serge is a serial entrepreneur who has been in telecoms for a long time, like started a QR code company a while ago and stuff. 5-6 years ago, he got obsessed with the idea of zeroing out his personal carbon footprint, right? And so I think like one of the things I'm kind of thinking about here is like, how do I, we were all born on a dying planet. We're all trying to figure out how to deal with that.
Yep.
And so I'm sharing that because I think, it's important to underscore that those feelings of anxiety can lead to something tangible and important later.
Yeah, sure.
And if anybody's experiencing those, they should honor them.
Right.
But basically, he started, digging around into promising carbon removal pathways. And he's a Harvard Business School dork, and kind of has a lot of data science background. So he, really, really went into it. And it turns out, after all of his research, all of his studying, the most appealing prospect was taking wood, which is 50% carbon by weight,
right,
and putting it in vaults so it doesn't decompose, right? So literally taking waste wood, unutilized, unwanted trees, which in New York City, I'm born and raised here, probably not intuitive to everyone.
No, but it's a lot because they have to, when they make a wood plank, they cut a lot of the wood off to get to the plank, right? So yeah.
Well, I mean, that's huge, but out west, the fastest growing forest carbon pool is dead wood in Colorado, Idaho. So basically, because of climate change, because of invasive species, because of droughts, because of all these things, you have this intersecting massive, and also because of weird fire policy that we've implemented for the last like 50 or 60 years.
Right.
You have this confluence of factors that creates massive die-offs of trees all across the West. And like, it's difficult to overstate the magnitude of this material that is just everywhere. Like if you drive on I-70 from Denver, you will be in periods of, where you're driving along the street and there are like these like piles of dead wood on the side of the road for miles, like pimples on a teenage face.
Wow.
They're called slash piles, right? And so basically, as a steward of a forested area, what you're thinking is fire is healthy, fire is going to happen. What we want to make sure is that it doesn't, go crazy, take over the landscape, and create a massive problem. I mean, so wildfires last year contributed more emissions than the entire global aviation industry by a factor of 3.
Yes, I did read that. Yeah,
it's also a more subtle point is that wildfires are responsible for about 50% of the most dangerous air pollution in the West.
Yes,
because the fine particulate matter they eject. Anyway, so there is this incredible need to remove dead woody material from these forests.
Okay.
Because that is one of the key ways that you can get foresters in there to, one, try and help the forest stay a forest.
Right.
Right? Because regrowth after a fire, regrowth after an invasion is not guaranteed.
Right.
And so their big problem, in part because of the decline of the mill industry in the US, is like no one wants this wood.
Okay.
right? Because it's scraggly.
Right.
I mean, it's literally detritus.
Right. It doesn't have much commercial use. Doesn't have much retail use. Yeah.
It
So,
doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't have. Like nobody wants to do anything with it. And so, but wood is 50% carbon by weight. It's made of this thing called lignin, which is a sort of glue-like substance that is naturally recalcitrant to decomposition.
Okay.
And oh, by the way that they get rid of all those like pimples on the side of the road is they set them on fire.
Oh.
Which like
So
spits
they
the carbon.
speed the process up a lot.
Yeah, basically that. I mean what that does is spits all the carbon back into the air,
Right.
spits all that fine particulate matter into the air.
Right.
But make sure that it doesn't create a catastrophic wildfire and kill a whole bunch of people.
Right. That's the one upside.
Yeah. Which is like, I mean, again, we were born on a dying planet. We're all doing the best we can. But foresters, people who are in charge of looking after that land, experience those burns as a profound operational tax.
Okay.
Because, first of all, no one wants to be that guy who like messed up and started a fire. Right. You have to burn on special days. You have to supervise it. And those days are not that easy to find. Like, in Arizona, some of the folks that we were talking to were like, yeah, there were only 2 days last year when we could do burns.
Right.
And we didn't manage to do that much of them.
Right. Right. So what's the alternative then? Leave it there.
Leave it there is one. And it does make sense to leave some of it there, right? Like, so, some wood is decomposing and that's good for soil health. It has fungal growth, all sorts of great stuff. But like nowhere near as much as exists, right?
Right. So what do we do with the rest of it?
So like the big default use case for a lot of folks for a long time has been bioenergy.
Yes.
Right. So there's been a movement, and I benefit hugely from a lot of the research that's been done on this, right? But a lot of the time people will pelletize this stuff and put it on boats and ship it to like bioenergy plants in South Korea or something. Right. Or like after Russia invaded Ukraine recently, a lot of that was happening as well. Right. So that's one use case. The other is you can make biochar out of it. Yeah. Which is it's sort of a worse conversion. In both of those cases, there's carbon emissions created, right? Right. You have to like start a fire.
You also have to ship it.
You have to ship it. You have to do a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's the actual transfer of the carbon value in the feedstock to the end product is very lossy. Like in biochar, if you're taking a ton of wood, only about 10% of the carbon in that is going to make it into the biochar. Oh, okay. Whereas if you take the wood and you just put it in this fancy vault that lives underground, we obviously have instruments. There's a lot of science behind how we make sure that it's not decomposing or spitting methane into the air. But if you do all of that stuff, at least 91.2% of the carbon in there will be intact after 100 years, at least. Okay. And that's based on studies in landfills where no one has done anything to keep the wood from decomposing. Yeah. What we're actually doing is like, speeding up the process by which fossil fuels were created in the first place.
Right. Well, but is there no imputed carbon in the creation of the vaults?
There is. Yeah, and you can only.
It sounds like a big project.
It is. Like, there's like a lot of big fun machines, and if you go on our website woodcache.org, there's a page for a pilot project where we have a whole bunch of videos of like various stages of the vault where our like Colorado general manager is out there and he's like, that is a big machine. Yeah. And like part of the fun of it from a practical standpoint is that I got to think about like intellectually, how do I get 300 million tons of wood? Right, which is like for anyone who's ever done a consulting interview.
Yeah, I don't even know how to calculate what is 300.
What is 300 million tons of wood? Did I say 300 million or 300 tons?
Yeah,
because I meant to say 300 million.
Yeah, no, you said 300. I'm just thinking like I don't even know how to relate to the zeros.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, but so the reality from a planetary standpoint is that if we do not start. Like 1.5 degree, we may surpass the 1.5 degree warming target this year. Yeah. I heard someone who's like reputable give a 50% probability of that.
Well, yeah,
today.
I mean, and this summer was a big part of it, right? Because it was hot everywhere.
And
fires, yeah.
Like if we have any hope of containing climate change before the jet stream collapses and like, we have the so-called blue ocean event where there's no polar ice and light gets trapped in the ocean and whatever. We need to start sucking a ton of particulate matter out of the air 5 years ago.
Yes.
And literally on the order of like 8 to 15 gigatons this year. The total amount.
So the debt, so to speak, over the next couple of years is going to be huge.
Yeah, I mean, one way to think about it intuitively is that climate change is driven by cumulative emissions. Right. So, in order to get back to normal, you have to undo
the cumulative effect of
the cumulative effect of the emissions, right? And so there's a social question about who pays for that, right? But there's also like a practical question about like how do we start doing that before the world becomes a fireball?
Well, right, because we don't even have anything to pay for right now because the invention on this stuff is so nascent.
Well, that's actually a premise that is fundamentally flawed.
Okay, give me to it. Come on.
Yeah. So like when we think about carbon removal in the asset management industry, and like I get sell side research notes like on this that to me seem like they're written in crayon.
Yeah.
Like it's like childish.
Okay.
The way that people are thinking about this. The people have this impression of like, okay, we're going to invent a direct air capture machine that is like this incredible hard tech problem and we're just going to scale it up to squillions and squillions of these things, and then that is going to be our salvation. Like an investment bank that will remain unnamed made that statement explicitly as their case, and they expect it to be solved by 2027.
Yes. So some people who are listening to this podcast may work for that bank. Anyway.
Yeah. That's why it remains unnamed. I'm sure you're all very nice people, and you're nice to your moms.
So because I'm actually familiar with it. So let's go back to the fundamental flaw for a second.
Yeah.
So what is the fundamental flaw? Is that
we need these crazy tech solutions in order to like do anything or make any progress. Right, like there are a number of relatively low-hanging, like what we do, for instance, like there's 113 million gigatons worth of carbon sitting on the forest floor in Colorado alone.
Well, no, I know it's there, but the process sounds not so low-tech to me, or at least from what I can tell from your website, it doesn't sound that low-tech.
I mean, it's basically you go and find piles of wood that people have removed from forest projects, or you collaborate with them, and then you pick it up. So it's more operationally intensive than like, we need to solve fundamental science problems.
Well, don't you also have to essentially sequester it for a very long time?
Yeah, and that goes into the vault design. So that's one of my like best friends and partners in this is an exploration geologist by training. And so, there are important things about like the nature of the soil. You want loamy clay soil that you want to be in places where it doesn't rain, where it's very dry.
Right.
So because the main thing that precipitates decomposition is water seeping into the vault.
Mm-hmm.
And, but if you keep the environment in there anaerobic, dark, dry, cold, decomposition is very well contained.
Yeah.
But like, it's not just, I'm not really like shilling my pathway.
No, I know. This is one of those things that I think not as many people are informed about.
Oh yeah, no, and like look, I'm a 6 foot tall trans woman with a deep voice who's walking around the Intermountain West going like, hey, how much waste wood do you have? And by the way, I want to build giant vaults of this stuff. Like I am so used to people looking at me like I have 6 heads.
Yeah. Well, it did occur to me that the federal government has a relatively large cave in New Mexico they might want to sell you.
Yeah, well, so like as we get to, the interesting thing is like, as you start to think about 10 megaton, 100 megaton, gigaton projects,
right,
which is where we need to be as an industry, and as a world, opportunities like that exist. But the reality in carbon removal is that the market cannot support that, right? So right now there's a great aggregator called CDR.FYI that is a sort of crowdsourced database of transactions that people can use to like look at. I guess I should note there's a separation too between long-term carbon removal and carbon credits.
Yeah.
Those are very different. So carbon removal implies that there's a permanence of 100 years or more to this thing. So it's not like a strategy where it's like, okay, here's this forest, I promise not to kill it, thanks for the money.
You're right.
So less than, I think, 2 megatons of carbon removal credits have been retired, like have been delivered and used.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's barely going to scratch that.
That's nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And like so there are and in theory, adherence to the science-based targets methodology
Yep.
have to use these carbon removals, not the carbon credits that they sell you on the airlines, like for $5, like you want to offset your thing.
Right.
But if you're going to have an SBTI target, put that in your K's and Q's,
Yep.
file on it. It needs to be done with carbon. Like any removals, any like offsetting you're doing has to be a carbon removal, not an offset.
Okay, so this is maybe a good place to start talking a little bit about the science-based metrics that you see people using out there, the science-based goals that you have. How you reading all that stuff?
Well, so yeah, there was this fun period where everyone was like, yeah, we're going to be net zero by 2050.
Yeah.
Right. And on my podcast, like Free Money with Sloan and Ashby, we were like, yeah, well, we're going to be net zero by 2049. So, so take a walk, guys. Yeah, exactly. But like those are statements of ambition,
mm-hmm.
right? And statements of direction.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people have 2030 targets. Like there are, there's something like 300 or 400 public companies and large institutions that have SBTI, 2030 targets to be net zero. So the most important component of that is decarbonization.
Mm-hmm.
If you're emitting carbon in some kind of way, figure out a way to not do it.
Right.
So I took the train here from Utah, for instance. Like that's a decarbonization move.
Yeah.
It's eccentric, but it's a decarbonization move.
Long.
It's beautiful. Everyone should do it.
Okay.
But so decarbonization is like the most important thing that needs to happen. But you can't like be perfect on that. Like sometimes you got to emit some carbon for some reason.
Yeah.
So the notion is you should be removing that carbon, at least to be like, a decent human or a decent company, you should be removing that carbon as you're emitting it.
Right.
And basically, of those 300 or 400 companies, of the thousands and thousands of companies that I've heard, make pronouncements of net zero,
yep.
There are about 14 buyers in the market.
Yeah.
We've met all of them.
Right.
You could like a subway car contains like. This makes the fixed income
industry.
Market look like liquid and transparent.
Right. Okay.
It's all based on like relationships, and comfort, right? And it's kind of like the financial services industry where what everyone is fundamentally working on is social trust at some level.
Yeah, sure.
Right, because like what needs to happen to scale any carbon removal methodology is people need to think it works.
Right. I mean, and this is a reason they used to call companies called bank trust companies. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And like
it was just a belief system.
It's just a belief, yeah. And like there's like a lot of people who are really on the the activist end of the anti-fossil fuel lobby are also very anti-carbon removal because they see it as I think that is basically an unstudied view. But like, the guy who did WeWork entered the carbon removal market and did a bunch of whiz bang stuff with the blockchain and started talking about making a whole bunch of money for everyone. Like, that creates a lot of skepticism.
Right.
And so what we really need in order to grow these things at scale is, one, companies that committed to removing stuff to actually buy stuff.
Right.
And like, that's not a trivial thing. That's like, if you're an endowment, change it, adding a private equity sleeve. That's a 5-year process that involves governance, oversight,
right.
Process, personnel.
Beginning due diligence, ongoing due diligence. Yeah.
The notion that a lot of boardrooms seem to have that we'll solve the tech by 2030 and they'll be able to just buy it and it'll be no big deal is both ahistorical and absurd.
Right.
And I would even go as far as to say, if you don't have pre-commitments by 2027, to do that, you're probably not going to be able to take delivery of those credits.
Right.
Because the market won't be there.
Right. They won't be available.
They won't be available. Yeah. And like right now, we're among the better capitalized of these companies just because we have a high pain tolerance and tofu's cheap.
Right.
Right.
There's no much cost for you.
We basically are sleeping in cots on grandparents, sofas and just doing this on the skin of our teeth because we know it needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an accurate characterization of the market as a whole. There are 50 or 60 companies that will go bankrupt in the next, 6 months if buyers don't show up in mass. And those companies, would represent, I think, in aggregate, something like, 15 megatons of lost carbon removal capacity in 2025 or 2026. That might grow to, and so there's like a lost generation that we're at risk of having right now. And because people are just sort of believing, some Deus Ex Machina moment is going to happen with technology.
Right.
You know.
Right. Yeah. Well, this is a little harrowing, but
Well, but the thing, so it's one of those things where, I think as fiduciaries, as investors, we have to commit to the gray areas in these things, right? We
Yeah.
have to take, be like eyes open about this, because the thing is, there's actually a lot of hope inside of it too.
Well, it's funny you mention this because like this is one of the things. I'm on the board of a nonprofit organization. And when you're talking about this, I'm starting to wonder what my long-term obligation is to that board. Because I feel like I have fiduciary obligation
Mm-hmm.
to manage this for that organization down the road
Exactly.
also.
Exactly.
And I'm cycling off in a year, but
No, but I mean, that's the kind of question that you should be thinking. I mean, it's like, okay, in the same way that like it's important to have financial statements
Mhm.
that are audited,
Right.
right? Like it's important from a just like social legitimacy standpoint to have a view on how you're gonna like actually do like your net zero thing,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
not punt on that.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I also, I've had a lot of thoughts about this also, is how relatively small organizations do measure this, who have decided that we're not going to have an office and we're just going to do stuff on fill in the blank cloud server.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's an interesting question, like, and like I think that, people are like, oh yeah, do we have to like come up with exactly how many carbons we emit as an organization and like negate them? That's a real journey,
Yeah.
right? What I would suggest is sort of like think about it like allocating to an asset class, or building a new kind of form of exposure, right? Where it's
Right.
like it's not a one-off decision.
Right.
It's not a single purchase. It's an annual process of review, iteration, and
Fascinating.
updating it, right? So like,
Okay.
and you don't necessarily need to go, okay, we emitted 100 carbons, we're gonna remove 100 carbons.
Right.
What you should do instead is go, this is a promising pathway. This is a promising pathway. This is a promising pathway, and take a portfolio approach, because these do have risks,
Fascinating.
as
Right.
approaches.
Sure.
And I think like if you're a global multinational, you should be pre-purchasing direct air capture credits, because that helps these companies stand up giant facilities.
Right.
But
Right.
the biggest one in the world is going to be like 1 megaton.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, these things only actually sequester carbon if they're run on green electrons, which like are not in great supply, right? Like, so
Right.
if you're burning fossil fuels to run a direct air capture machine,
Right.
you better either be scrubbing those fossil fuels out, or something like
Yeah.
so like finding pathways like biochar, like what we do, bikers, biomass storage capture.
Yeah.
There are a lot of really innovative programs that I've heard about here in Climate Week, where the OTPP is doing a fascinating thing.
Yeah.
Where
I saw that. Yeah.
where they're kind of trying to shut down oil wells and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Take a portfolio approach. Like in 5 or 7 years, hopefully we will stop hearing about the golden age of private credit,
Right.
and we'll be able, and folks will have disciplines, processes, and operations around how they think about this stuff.
Well, okay, yeah, perhaps we should. This is an excellent topic. First off, I mean, thank you so much. This is you're so well versed in this in a way that we haven't had anybody. So thanks so much. I think this is a great place for people with CFA charters to think about this.
Oh my gosh!
Because we're so well trained at coming up with investment policies, asset allocation, rebalancing, all that. It's a great way to frame it.
It's like I think there's this guy Tom Brackey, who's like sort of a wise figure. A lot of people in the investment industry will know, and like I was sitting around with him a while ago, and he was like, in the investment industry, it used to be that everyone got into the business, and it was kind of a funny story how they wound up here.
Right. I went to a party and talked to somebody.
Yeah. Or like I took an acid trip, and like or something like and that's the way it is in carbon removal.
Mm-hmm.
And the capability, like there's this premise that people have sometimes, which I find disappointing, that they don't have the scientific background to be useful, right? The things that are actually needed are like we need loans.
Right.
We need and by the way, this is like our thing is not ideal for venture capital funding mechanisms, right? It's not like we shouldn't be taking capital that has a 45% IRR hurdle
Right. Or
for a
has
whole
the
balance sheet.
yeah, or after year 6 has that the VC's
Yeah,
name.
I mean, that will happen.
Mhm.
There will be a lot of value generated. I mean, by various estimates. I mean, it's kind of like, will it be a $2 trillion market or a $20 trillion market? So like throwing the numbers around is
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
But like clearly, if you can generate value in the carbon removal market, sell the things, and have scalable unit economics, you're going to do okay, right? Like, so but the thing is like, it's more akin to an oil well, and the financing around that. Like there's a debt, there's project financing, there's a lot of, those instruments. Like part of the reason we're able to think in a sophisticated way about this is because we're basically taking the tooling that the oil industry built,
Right.
and thinking, okay, so how do we think about this in land rights? How do we think of,
There's limited partnerships for that. Yeah, there's a well-worn path here. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a well-worn path here, and the cost of capital is too damn high.
Well, yeah.
Right. The cost of capital is absurd. Like, I actually, as I think about it, many of the companies that are really interesting are founded, including ours, are founded by people who cleaned out their 401ks and just did it, because it needed to happen.
Right. They just went for it.
They just like, they found a ball of string and a couple paper clips in the whatever, and they figured out how to make it happen. This is when finance needs to show up.
Right.
And yeah, like if you are a CFA charter holder, if you're a lender, if you're experiencing the golden age of private credit, and you're trying to come up with a new place to do loan growth, sweetheart.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, boy, do I have an asset class for you.
Yeah.
And I would encourage anybody seriously listening to this who's interested in this to use me and my firm and my community as a resource. Because if you send us, I mean, we may wind up going like, here's a blog post or something like that.
Right.
But like, I would love to be a conduit for anybody who's trying to affect that transition, because like a lot of other people are trying to illuminate that pathway.
Right.
Because like by the second that you start walking down it, you're like, oh, this is not well-worn, not nearly well-worn enough.
Right. Right. Well, yeah, I mean, this is, thank you very much for offering that to the members also, because, that's one of the ways that everyone finds out about these things. But, maybe we should leave it here because there's been a lot. I want people to be able to digest it. And and thank you, Sloan, and welcome back to
Thank
CFA
you. Yeah, it's great to be back. And long distance high five to everyone out there in CFA land.
Yeah. So thank you all for listening to this podcast. If you'd like to find out more about this, we're going to put Sloan's websites and some of those blog posts in the show notes, and you can always find out a little bit more from us at cfany.org. Until next time, I'm Rob Rowan, and I've been your host.